Hi, this tutorial is going to go over how to connect Axis Neuron with TouchDesigner. So I guess like a prerequisite for this is like a little bit about how TouchDesigner works and like the node structure and what each type of component is, that kind of thing. So let's get started. If you don't know TouchDesigner that well, I'll put a link in the description to like a useful beginner's tutorial. But here we go. Let's get started. I'm going to use Axis Neuron Pro, but you can use Axis Neuron too. It's fine. It's just the version that I have right now. So for this, I don't have the suit on or anything right now, so I'm just going to load up one of the kind of stored defaults that comes with Axis. So it doesn't really matter which one. And now, if you play it, if you have your settings correctly, it should stream like it is live. So there's no worries there. Like you don't need a suit to get the setup going at least. Eventually, you'll probably need a suit. So let's drag this in. So I made this little component here. It pretty much just grabs the data that Axis Neuron is streaming over and converts it into something usable in TouchDesigner. So let's get started by setting up the Axis Neuron broadcast settings. So if you go to File, click on Settings. So this can be left, just leave this page, go to Output Format. And now in here, you might want to change some of these settings. The default should be okay too, but it depends on what your rotations are. So let's zoom into this little network thing. So I made this network. I'm going to put this up on GitHub somewhere and then have a link in this video. But you can also use this, like a similar component by Richard Burns, and he goes over the setup again here. It's similar, but I just prefer using mine because I don't need to fold that. So in this one, you need to, hold on, let me get that open again. So in this one, you don't need anything additional. You just need this component. So I have these settings here that are very helpful. So I don't forget if I move this network to another computer. So in output format, frequency reducing is set to 1. Rotations are set to X, Y, X, Z. Displacement is checked. Reference is not checked. And calculation data, sensor global, sensor local, sensor local. So this might be pretty standard, even if you just open it up. If you just open up Axis Neuron. So just make sure your rotations are correct. So now let's go to, you can leave shortcuts, you can leave advanced. Let's go to broadcast. So you can use TCP or UDP, but in this network that I'm using right now, I'm going to be using UDP. I also have a TCP thing in here, so it works the exact same way. So it's not a big deal. I'm not sure why you would use one or the other, but in this case, I'm just using UDP. So make sure you have your leave advanced BVH disabled. So don't check that off, but have BVH enabled and set the format to string. And then the server port and the client port should be the same, like default. So you might not need to touch that. Just in case you need, if this is different on your computer, you can use the settings here. Or you can just set it to whatever you want if you have something that's using that port. So, okay. So now, how does this thing work? I mean, it's pretty simple. All it does is it takes, this is a header from a BVH, and I just kind of stripped it down to just have the labels for each, like, node, I guess, body part. So each body part, like for example, the hips, it has a transformation and a rotation attached to it. So when this data comes in Axis Neuron, it's just coming in as like one long, it's like spaced like Yes, it's just numbers and then they're spaced apart. So what this network does is just cleans it up and labels it so you can actually use it as a chop. Sorry. So very simple. So let's get kind of started with this. Let's make sure that it works. So it'll start streaming out right away. So you can just hit play, and it's working right now. So you can see the rotation's changing and the transformation's changing. So I'm gonna stop and let's drag in a model. So these models that I'm using are from Mixamo. So Mixamo is like this Adobe website that has models that you can use. You need to look into if these are free use or not. I don't think that they are. So I'm just using this as an example. You can really use any rigged character, but you will use this model very specifically because this works right away in TouchDesigner, and I'll show you why we're using this model. So this is just an FBX that I downloaded from Mixamo. Just drag it in. Okay, so now this is an FBX, and on the inside, if you look in here, you have all of these nulls. So what these nulls are, they're just attached to kind of they're attached to all the vertices that are near it. So think of this as like a skeleton inside this mesh. And when you move these nulls, stop doing that. Okay, when you move these null points, they'll move the mesh that's on the outside. Okay, so the one thing to remember is if you just kind of plot these points, I'm gonna put down a null. So right click, null, just so we can see that it's still moving without having to go into the network. So well, the thing about these like points that are coming in is they're not in the space that these points are in. So what am I trying to say? So they're all relative to each other. So let's say if you have a hip position or a spine position, right? So this hip position is relative to whatever else is around it. So let's say if you have a hip here, and then you have a leg. So the rotations in the right up leg is relative to the hip. So if the hip rotates, the leg also rotates. And if the right up leg rotates, the right leg rotates as well. So they're all relative to each other, and all their transformations are also relative to each other. So if you try to plot this out in 3D space, it'll all just be like kind of jumbled up. So to make this actually work properly, it needs to be exported to each one of these nulls. So let's do that right now. And a really simple way that I've been doing it like this. I just add an in, and this is kind of the export animation. It's just a null, so it's not a big deal. So all of these, it's a chop null. Sorry, these are nulls too, but they're different types of nulls. This is I think it's a geo null. Yeah, let me just double check that. Add operator. Yeah, I guess it's a comp null. Okay. So it's just like a container, right? So you move the container and you move what's inside it. So what's inside it is this little, it's like a visualizer, I guess. It's just a cross. But these things are now attached to the actual mesh. So when you move this reference, the mesh also moves. Right, okay, this will make a whole lot more sense after I connect it. So export animation. So all of these exports right here are all connected to this one chop. So let's zoom out and connect that. Right. So right away it moved. It moved because now it's attached. And whatever movement this character is doing in here in Axis. So this is just a default, but if you had the suit on, the motion capture suit on, it would be moving accordingly. So that looks okay. The one thing is that I'm just gonna replay this, and it's a little bit strange. It rotates a little bit too much sometimes on the knees, right? So I found a way to kind of fix that. Is you just need to change the select all the nulls, and then you change the rotate order. So Z, RZ, RX, and RY. So now if you go back out and play that again, right? There's no more weird rotation on those knees. Okay. So the rotate order kind of chooses the order in which to apply the rotation. So when the rotation comes in here, it's R, RY, RX, RZ, and that's what we set in Axis Neuron. So we just need to change it inside here to hold on, let me just get back in there. To RZ, RX, and RY, and that should fix those kind of oddly rotating joints. So, I mean, this works pretty well, but let's see what happens when we try to bring in another model. So remember earlier I had said that this model is like a unique model. It's one of the only ones that actually works. There might be a few more on Mixamo that work, but let's look at a model that doesn't work. And this could be any model that you download that's rigged in a particular way. So both of these models, it doesn't look like it's different, but they are very different in the way that they're rigged. So rigging is like, I guess, the way that the mesh is joined to these points right here. These like rotation transformation references. So that's, I guess that's what how I think of what rigging is. So let's go into this FBX. Okay. So one thing to note here is this one's labeled differently. So this one's labeled Mixamo 6 right shoulder. So we just need to make sure that when we add our in chop, so we can get our motion capture data in here, we need to relabel it so it says like right now it didn't export because all of these nodes are expecting it to be named with this naming convention. So I'm just going to copy that. This is really easy right now, but I guess like there could be a situation where it's named completely different, and you might need to change it like one at a time. So I'm gonna grab a select. Okay, so the channel name right here, it's gonna be asterisk, I guess. We can leave that, and then we can go to rename to and just paste our Mixamo rig 6 and then a just copy this, whatever this might be. So Mixamo rig 6, and hold on, let's get back there. So yeah, this is correct. Now to just type in asterisk, and as you can see, it's all connected now because all the labelings match. So now when we go back out, we're gonna have this like really weird looking model. So let's go back to Axis and hit play. Right, sorry about that. Let me just hit home. So now we have this extremely strange looking model. So like, what is going on here? So the transformations that's coming in from the suit is kind of just pulling the model apart, and the rotations are rotating according to that. But you don't actually need the transformations. So I'm gonna hit insert operator and then select. So you don't need the transformations because, I mean, the distance is in the model already set, so you don't need that again. All you really need is the rotations, and you need one transformation to move the model along in the scene, and that'll be the hip. So we're gonna just ignore the hip for now, and we'll add it in later. So I'm gonna select the channels star, any of the rotation channels. So RX, RY, RZ. Okay. So now this is more typical of what you might see when you just drag in a model and try to attach it to the Axis neuron. So I'm going to hit play. So it just kind of like rotates everything in the wrong direction, kind of. So this is, I guess, something that's been happening in TouchDesigner with rigs specifically. So I saw this in a tutorial by this YouTube person called Factory Settings. So this one is how to control a character using Kinect V2. So very similar to this tutorial, but that one's using a Kinect V2. So what this kind of goes over is this person pre-rotates the bones in order to avoid all these rotations while it comes in. So what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna use a mesh that actually, an armature or like a skeleton that actually works. So let's take a look at this in Blender. Okay. So now we have Blender open. I'm just going to import it as an FBX. And the first one I'm going to import is the model that we're working on right now. It's CH20 PBR. Import FBX. And just so we can see it a little bit better, hold on, where is it? Okay. So we can see this this armature or kind of skeleton thing a little bit better. Let's click on, it's called the armature here, and let's go to viewport display and hit in front. So what that'll do is it'll make it easier to see right through it, and you can see where all the bones are. So this is what a proper rig should look like. And if you look at that tutorial I showed you earlier, it kind of looks similar. And what this person does is just rotates the joints in a way that it's the correct orientation when it gets into TouchDesigner. Okay, so now let's import the model that actually works, because at the start we looked at the first model, and that one was working just fine. So let's import that. Let's look at what that one looks like. Right. So let's take a look. So this one, and I'm going to do the same thing with the in front, so we can see it a little bit better. Actually, I checked that out twice. Okay, there we go. So you can see that this is a completely different rigging structure. Like, let's look at more of the bone specifically, and it's very strange. So if you click on this one is right leg up, and that's controlling this part right here, but it's all the way up there for some reason. So it's the same thing here. Left leg up, and the same thing here. So all of these are rigged in a different, maybe it's like an older rigging type, or it's just a not the same as, obviously not the same, but it's like, it's a different standard maybe, I don't know. So I kind of figured this out through like trial and error, and like bringing this into to Blender and just messing around with it like that. So if you know what this is, this type of rigging structure is, please leave a comment. So so instead of having to, we could just do this right instead of bringing it into Blender and like just swapping it around. So what we're gonna do now is delete this one, right? So we're gonna take this armature, and we're going to stick it onto our new mesh. And this was, I kind of figured this out through trial and error, so it might not be like the right way of doing it, but yeah, I'm not like an expert in Blender or motion capture for that matter. This was like a very, yeah, I pretty much guessed how to do this. Yeah, so please let me know if you have any suggestions on how to do this thing properly, or if you know what's actually going on and why is this really different from that one. That's that would be great. So the next thing, just kind of drag it in and try to position it in the same way that it was before with the new model. So you might have to go in and just realign these things, these little bones here. So I just went into object mode up here, object mode, click on the bones, edit mode. So now we can just edit this easily. Try to put it in to where like the logical spot is. But the other thing to keep in mind is like this is not the logical spot here, and this is not the logical spot here either. So yeah, so don't bother trying to move this down and try to make sense of it, because it's just gonna look weird. It's not gonna look right when you move it to TouchDesigner. So, and it seems to be just with the legs and the hips. Everything else is pretty okay. And yeah. So let's do this. What I did was I just try to line the arms up, the thumbs and stuff here. I'm just gonna do this very quickly to. This could take some time. So what you might want to do is do a rough go at this and then come back and clean it up a little bit. See what it looks like in TouchDesigner and then come back. So let's keep going. I just made it a little bit bigger. I think it needs to be a bit smaller. So yeah, you can actually just move these individually too. So wherever you think that it would go. So this one is, what is this one called? Left-hand thumb. So the thumb is, so it starts all the way at the tip, and then this goes kind of at like the knuckles and stuff, and the joints or whatever. Yeah, so it's pretty like logical how to do this. It's not this one is fine, but this is the only one that you need to watch out for and not change. Okay, same thing here. I'm just gonna do this really quickly. Not paying too much attention because for this tutorial's sake, just a little bit. So just roughly lines up. And one more thing, I'm just going to grab all of these. Just let edit mode, object mode. No, not object mode. Go back to edit mode. Sorry about that. I'm going to grab all of these and we're just going to go slightly up. Right, okay. And move this out a little bit. So these ones are actually arms. They're called left arms, but they're at the shoulders, which is pretty strange. And then the shoulders are all the way in here. So just keep that in mind. I'm just kind of moving it out a little bit because if you remember the old model, I think it had narrower shoulders. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. So yeah, you can kind of look at. Oh, it disappeared. Let's get that back. I think the rotation is 90. Okay. Right. Sorry about that. So I guess you could rig your own model and then point it all the way up. Because if you really like flip this over, let's go to the rotation. It's kind of like, actually it's not even close. Yeah, so I was gonna say that you could just take your old rig and point all of the things up, but I guess that wouldn't work either. Yeah, I mean, if you have a better solution, please let me know. This is trial and error again. Okay, now what? Let's go back to object mode, and we're going to parent this. So I click Shift, hold down Shift, and then click on the so mesh first, hold down Shift, and then on the skeleton armature thing, and then I'm going to right click and hit parent, and then I'm going to go Armature Deform. Okay, so now let's go to the mesh. We're going to work on this for a minute. So I'm going to get rid of these two armatures. Okay, and I'm going to add another one. So I'm just going to click armature, and there's a little eyedropper thing, and you can just click the eyedropper thing and click on armature. So now hit apply. Okay, so that should be applied. So we're not quite done yet. There's one more thing to look at here. Okay, so right now these rigs, these two things aren't connected. So usually when you do that, when you do a parenting like this, so shift, so click on your mesh, shift, and then the armature, and then you go parent, you can go with automatic weights, but we already have weights. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm just going to go to weight paint, click on your mesh, go to weight paint. So we actually already have weights here that are that came with the model. So when you're, let's say if you have your own model, try to rig it first without using this weird pointed up rig. So just rig it like you would normally, and that way you'll get good weight paints when you do your automatic weight paints. So again, automatic weight paints is this. So you click on the mesh, hit shift, click on the armature, and then parent. I right click there, parent, with automatic weights. So if you do that, it'll give you all of your, it'll try to calculate the weights automatically. So what that'll do is like, it'll go into like this arm right here, and it'll grab all the vertices in that area and parent it to that joint. But right now, the way that this model is set up, this weird rig thing, if it goes to grab the the right leg up, it's going to grab things from the side, right? So that's going to deform the mesh wrong. And so like a really quick way to do it is just to use the vertex groups that already came with it. So the weights that already came with it. So I'm going to go to weight paint again. And so a super easy way to do this is to just rename them to the joints that are on your skeleton armature thing. So in this case, I know that it's just the same thing without Mixamo Rig 6. I'm just going to keep going and remove all of that. Okay, got a little bit bigger. It's a little bit tedious because of all the thumbs and fingers, but it's a lot easier than having to weight paint it again. So I'll show you a little bit later why it's better to do this than to just re-weight paint it. So the way that the weight paint stuff like moves over to TouchDesigner is not the same way as it would in a regular 3D program. So it'll actually leave vertices behind, and I'll show you what I mean in a second while I'm done this. So like if you miss a vertices and that's not parented to one of the bones, it'll just ignore everything around it, right? So like it'll just leave that in the original position that it's in. And I have a weight painted version that I'll show you, but yeah, just do it again. So very tedious again, but much faster and much more accurate than weight painting it yourself. Okay. Close, almost done. So if you want more accuracy, spend a lot more time on the hands because, yeah, just do that really quickly. And sometimes you will have fingers in your suit, I guess. But in this case, this is just a demo, so I'm not going to get super into that. Almost done. Okay, so that looks like it's done. So let's go into object mode. So that looks pretty okay, I guess, for a super rough model. So let's select all of it and go to export, FBX. So I'm going to call this one test FBX1. Okay, and in here, all you really need is the armature and the mesh. You don't need any of this other stuff because it'll come in and it'll just add a camera when you don't need it. Yes, that's fine. And export. Okay, so let's drag that in here. So I'm just going to leave all of these open so you can see kind of the progression of what it should look like to what it was and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's get that. Okay, test FBX1, drag that in. Okay, so now same process. We're going to stick an in on here. So let me just split the window and I'm going to show you the difference between the networks. So in here, this is the old network. So the thing that's the most different is definitely the names, right? So we switched the armature. So now all of these names will match the names of the skeleton armature thing, that the new one that we just put in. So let's click and drag in here. So now we have the in coming in, and I'm just gonna replace the existing animation. So that looks pretty good. It still hasn't changed though. So let's go to Axis to confirm. Oh, it still hasn't changed. Let's go back to Blender. I think I haven't parented this properly, so I'm going to select everything again. Control P. No, mesh first. Shift, click on the armature skeleton thing. Right click, parent, Armature Deform group. Right. So did you see that little shift there? So I think now it should be working. Let's export that again. FBX. Export FBX, okay. Now in here, all we're gonna do is go to the parameters and hit import. So what that'll do is like, it'll get rid of everything and re-import the model. So zoom in again. Let's add our in again. In. Okay. Right. Connect that. So no exports because there's nothing in there. Okay. Now let's go to our select and check that out. That's way better than what it was. It still needs some work there. So maybe that'll be fixed if I hit play. Could just be like an odd, like a weird second or something. Okay. Where did it go? Okay, here we go. Huh. So this is what I mean when I said it'll just leave it behind. So what happened right here, so this is probably going to be the right leg. Let's go inside and see. I think that that one will still say Mixamo on it. Right foot. No, it doesn't. Okay, no, it's not a problem. Let's go back in here. Let's check our weight paints and see what's up. Okay. So that's kind of as I suspected. The right leg, the right foot, and the right toe base. The labels weren't changed. So now this one is looking for a Mixamo Rig 6, but that's the one that we deleted. So you just need to rename it, and I think everything should be fine after that. Okay. Cool. Now let's export that again. Okay, we're just gonna export it right on top of it. Zoom out. Same thing, import. Okay. Right. Let's add our in. Okay. That looks pretty good. So back to Axis, hit play. That's looking pretty good. So the one thing to remember here is a few things. So you can see that rotation thing is back, where it's rotating the knees pretty badly. So let's go back in, and if you remember what we did to the first model, just select all of them and change the rotate order to Z, X, Y. Let's go back, and that should be much better right now. Okay, much better. So one more thing, it's actually not moving along in the space, and that's because in here, in the select, we have only selected the rotations. So what we also need is the hip parameter. So the hip kind of tells the model where it is in the world. Let's try that. I think it might be with a capital H. Yep. So now that we have the hip parameter, it just kind of, it can move it along properly. So that's working really well, and as we want to. Okay, so earlier I mentioned the weight painting, kind of technique. So let's look at the weight paints here. So these weight paints kind of came with the model from Mixamo. So they were, I guess, rigged with another rig, and then the weight paints applied from that rig to this one when I changed the names here. So that works really well, but let's see what happens if you don't have that. So I'm going to open up a model that I made earlier that I weight painted myself. Let's say that. So one of the things to watch out for is when you have a model like this, it needs to be one complete mesh, and it has to be hollow on the inside. So I don't know what the standard is for just doing this sort of thing in, I don't know, Maya or Blender or whatever. But in TouchDesigner, if these bones aren't parented to the mesh properly, it'll leave the vertices behind. So that's kind of like really important, and to keep that in mind. So let's look at the weight paint for this. Even though it might look like it's working, once we go into TouchDesigner, it's definitely not working. So right, so like the head, right? It looks like it's parented correctly. All of this stuff looks like it's weight painted correctly, but it might work in Maya, but in Blender or Maya, whatever. But inside TouchDesigner is not going to work. So let's zoom in. So this is one of the reasons why I need it to be hollow. When you zoom in, all of this inside stuff is it's not painted correctly, right? So this is the one that I did manually, and it's actually kind of impossible to get into the folds and all of that, because you don't really know how many vertices there are inside here. So one thing you can do is just cut it out, and that's fine. So like even if you look in here, right? Like this interior spot's supposed to be completely red, but it's not, and it's going to be an issue later when you move it to TouchDesigner. Okay, so let's see what that looks like when we drag it over. I already exported this model out, so it's going to be test FBX. Hold on. Too many track that. Okay, it's the wrong one. So this is the one that the one that I was just showing you. And let's see what that looks like. It won't look entirely wrong because everything is parented correctly, but it's going to be just slightly off, and it's pretty noticeable. So let's look at that. So all of those, all of the points on the inside that I couldn't get to because of the mesh just start sticking out because they're parented wrong. So this little line here, if you can see that, it's going to stretch back to the origin of where it started because it's not parented to any of the bones, I think. And if you look here, this part is deformed here because this is an automatic, yeah. I think this is, yeah, this is kind of not weight painted correctly. So that's why I suggest weight painting in with a normal proper rig before swapping rigs. Because the automatic weight painting won't work. It'll be kind of weird, and it'll look strange when it's moving. Right? Like look at those that displacement. But I mean, it is a lot better than it was here, right? So I think if you're careful enough, and if you're forced to weight paint it yourself, it's not too bad. It's just a whole trial and error thing. So let's look at something that. So this is one that I've weight painted myself before. Before I kind of figured out the automatic name swapper alignment thing. So this is a custom model that someone at that we used for a project at OCAD, and this thing was presented at the ISEA workshop. Let me just show you a quick excerpt, I guess. This is just one of the tests that we did, the early test. A lot of the stuff is still in progress, so the documentation is coming out soon, so I don't really want to show you like a full network or anything. So yeah, like it doesn't look too bad. This one is all weight painted by hand. There's a few like odd bends here and there, but again, if you rig this in with a normal rig first, this shouldn't even be an issue. And the nice thing about this is like this is all real time. So all these shadows are all being cast in real time, and yeah, it's pretty quick. It doesn't take up a whole lot of effort too on like your computer side. So that's about it for this tutorial. There's not a whole lot of documentation for Axis Neuron TouchDesigner. So if you do have any suggestions or any improvements to make, please leave a comment below. Thanks.